Hey, yeah. Welcome back. I had the privilege of talking to an individual close to a case that we just covered. If you listened to the show last week, the main show, we covered a case called The Trail of Blood, where Janet Downing was murdered, and a lot of people believe they got the right guy, which happened to be a kid, Edward O'Brien Jr., and his family and several other neighbors have tried to point the finger at different people or point the finger away from Edward. One of the people that they point the finger at is Artie, which Artie was the brother-in-law of Janet, lived at her house for 2 years, and then moved out a little bit before the murder took place. Artie reached out to us saying, hey, some of the stuff that you were talking about in the case is just not true. And if you'd like to hear a more in-depth view into some of those things, I can help you out. So we got on the phone and did so. Listen in.
And Janet Downing's ex-brother-in-law. I was her brother-in-law when she was murdered. I still remain friends with the families, both the Salamini family, which is her brother, Janet's brother, and still remain friends with my ex-wife, Janet's sister. Other than that, being connected to the case, I arrived there like anybody else would.
How are you called to the scene?
My wife had called my work. The dispatcher informed me to call home right away, which I did, from a payphone because cell phones weren't in then. She said to me, you need to get to Janet. Something happened. I immediately hung up, and I drove from downtown Boston to 71 Boston Street, where she lives.
And what time do you think you arrived at Janet's house?
I'd say about 9:45-ish, 10 o'clock in that time frame.
And you're driving from work. You were a taxi cab driver. You were driving from the Boston area?
Yeah, I was driving. No, my area is Somerville, Mass, because it's a separate entity. We can't do jobs in Boston, but we can drop off there. I was dropped off at South Station in Boston.
I'm sure as a taxi cab driver, you guys had some kind of a log of the customers you drove around that day. Did the police ever ask you for a log of those customers?
I believe that's a question for the police because I can't get into what I truly believe.
I just don't know if they did their due diligence in this case as far as clearing other suspects.
No, I believe they did their due diligence very, very fine. It just came together quick for them.
Well, and you also were telling me earlier that we reported that your car was parked on a different road than it actually was on.
Yeah, it was actually parked on what we call Hamlet Street. Janet's actual address is 71 Boston Street, but her house is right at the corner of those two streets. And I was parked on Hamlet Street facing up towards Boston Street approximately. I know I was before the stop sign. I'll put it that way.
Well, some of the speculation by the neighbors was that your car was blocked in by police officers, ambulance, or EMT.
Absolutely not. I was the only one parked on Hamlet Street. And if they needed to get around, they could very well have made that turn onto Hamlet Street. The claim by Gina Mahoney is that my car was facing down towards Highland Avenue, other side of the street, which would have been parked correctly if, in fact, I was parked there.
So what happens when you arrive at the scene?
When I first drove up, I saw yellow tape. And like I told you before, growing up in Boston, knowing what yellow tape means, there's been a crime committed. This is in my head before I even get out of the cab. So I immediately jump out of the cab. I made an attempt to run into the house. The police stopped me and said, no, you can't go in there. Okay, so I backed off and I said, well, where's my family members? What's going on? And the officer, I don't remember his name, black or white, I don't know. He told me that Ryan is over there in the police cruiser. I went over there and I tried to speak to him. I'm like, Ryan, what happened? What's going on, buddy? He couldn't talk. He just had that look of terror in his face.
Well, and as you're pulling up, you don't know if something happened to your sister-in-law or if something happened to one of her kids.
Correct.
So after he's not able to tell you what's going on, what did you do next?
I walked over to Gina Mahoney's porch because that's who I knew.
How did you know her? Just from living there for a couple years?
No, I kind of knew of her because I knew her daughters from outside of the neighborhood before I even moved here. So I went over to them and I looked, I said, what happened? These are words from Gina Mahoney's mouth. They just took Janet out. I said, what do you mean? They took her out in an ambulance. I later learned the reason for that was that she had a faint pulse. And sadly, she didn't make it.
How long do you think you spoke with her?
Off and on through the night. She even let me use her phone to call my wife at the hospital. I called my wife at the hospital. I said, honey, what's going on? And she told me, Janet's gone.
How long do you think the police and EMTs were there that night?
I don't know how long they were there before I got there, but for the time I was there, the police were there throughout the night because they have to secure it for a warrant to search the house. Mm-hmm. That's just common knowledge. I can't give you a time frame on when the fire department left. I do remember them still being there, but there was no ambulance there when I got there.
And at some point in this evening, one of the reasons people point the finger towards you is that you lost your car keys?
At some point from the moment I got there, I lost my car keys. Let me specify. I lost a car key, not keys, with a little dog tag and ring on it.
So what you're saying is you had your keys, but you had a single key that you would use to drive your car, your taxi car. Did you drive the same car every day?
No, they gave us different ones every night. Unless they thought you were a good driver, they would give you a newer cab every night. But no, I remember specifically that night I was driving cab number 42.
So when do you think you lost this taxi car key?
Correct, and I don't know when that was.
Did you ever find the key?
I did not.
And the neighbor also reported that your taxi car was towed that night, correct?
Yes, it was.
So did your work end up having to make a replacement, or did they have a replacement key for that cab?
Yeah, they have a replacement key on hand, and they also have a key making machine there for when they get other cabs. Since we're on the topic of the key, it's reported in the book and by Gina Mahoney that the police found the key and gave it back to me. That is a complete false statement.
I wish the police would have just went to your work because, one, they could have saw the record log, your work log, which would have established some kind of alibi, which then when a book came out or when people were digging for information, police could have said, well, we talked with Artie's employers and he had an alibi for that time during the murder. Why do you think the parents and the neighbor and some other people have come forward and tried to point the finger towards you?
My belief is to get people to believe that it wasn't Eddie, to get Gina's statements in that it could have been me. For 25 years of these false accusations. No, man, I'm just tired. I'm tired about it. You know, it's taken a lot out of me.
Do you remember what you were wearing that night?
I can tell you it was a pair of shorts and a shirt. That's about it.
And I know the police questioned you, but you didn't really believe you were a suspect or under suspicion. But let the listeners know what happened to you when you showed up at the actual trial of Edward O'Brien.
We left home, me and my wife, dropped our child off at the daycare they had in the courthouse downstairs, proceeded to go up to the beginning of the trial. Judge comes in, jury comes in. With probably 3 minutes later, Mr. Riley, asked me to talk to him. And he says, I apologize, but you're not allowed in the courtroom. And I asked him why. And he says, because the defense has me on their witness list. So I had to leave.
And you were telling me that your sister-in-law didn't really date much after the divorce.
She did not date after her divorce, that I am aware of.
Some people would want to know how that divorce went down. Was there any animosity there?
That's a question for Jan and her ex-husband, and unfortunately, there's only one person that can answer that.
Yeah, but you can answer how you feel about her ex-husband.
Her ex-husband?
Yeah.
I think he's a great guy. Great father. Great grandfather.
Do you believe he stepped up after her death? Because she was primarily the caregiver to the children.
He absolutely did step, took his children in.
Now, I heard that there was a trail of blood that was found once they towed your car.
Yes, there was a blood trail. It was like 30 feet behind my cab. I remember seeing it the next day.
So there was a blood trail, it just was not connected to your actual vehicle. And Edward was known as this gentle giant. You lived across the street from him for 2 years. Can you give me what your thoughts on Edward was?
You know, to this day, I have no bad words for his parents or him, other than the fact that he killed my sister-in-law. I occasionally drank on the O'Brien's front porch with the dad. I played street hockey in the street with the kids, including Eddie and the other named boys in the book, Marco Abreu, John Fitzpatrick, and a couple of other kids. It was a common thing.
Right.
I enjoyed playing with kids because I've had kids of my own, and I still do, obviously.
Right.
You know, we used to have snowball fights. I'd be at my house, Eddie would be standing on his porch, and I'd toss one over, and he'd duck out of the way.
Did you think he was a good kid?
From what I knew of him at the time, I thought he was.
You said something pretty interesting to me, and I think a lot of listeners and a lot of people that dove into this case deeper have not picked up on, is not only has Edward's story changed on what happened, but go through the events of what he claims happened inside the house.
Well, there's a bit of a long pathway up to the foyer door. There's a foyer when you enter, approximately, I'd say 4x4, if I remember correctly. And immediately was the house door to go into the house. He claims the door was open. He went in. This is in the book. He went in, leaned over and said, Janet, Janet. And then out of nowhere comes this so-called killer, nylon mask, as said in the book. This is at the entrance of the door. If this man threatened him, like they said in the book, I'll kill you, I'll kill your family, I know you. And he said, leave. Why ain't you going to go out the front door, 52 feet to your house, but yet you decide to leave through the basement, out the back, the door, through the bushes, and run down the street? How he got back to his house, I don't know. He got back to his house from the Midnight Variety when he claims he was mugged. That's when he goes back to his house. And it's in record that his family later on convinces to take him to the hospital to get his hand checked.
Yeah, and the big question is, we find some blood on Edward, but we would think that he would be soaked in blood. Do you think he went to his work or somewhere to clean up?
He did not go to his work to clean up. He went to Burger King, as stated by Margot Nash, and went into the bathroom to refresh himself. And then he's walking to his work, and where he was mugged is perfectly in the middle of Burger King and where he worked.
Right.
Police later on took him to the scene where he was claimed to be jumped. And if he has a severe cut on his hand, there's going to be blood somewhere on the ground. And there was not.
And this is a vicious murder, violent murder.
66 stab, 32 slash wounds. And I want to clarify something in a book that Margot says. She says the slash wounds were post-mortem, which means you're dead. Why would the ambulance take her out if she had a pulse?
Is there other claims that we made or have been made about you in the past that you'd like to clear up?
Yeah, I mean, to discuss about Gina Mahoney. I mean, she makes up all these accusations, and one of them is that we were kicked out of the house for selling drugs, that I was kicked out, selling drugs to the neighborhood kids, which is false. We moved out in March of 1995, March 2nd, because we got the call on March 1st that the apartment was available for us. And I remember leaving. Janet was crying when we left. And it was later learned through her son, Paul, that he also said Mom was crying because we left.
Right.
I actually have it in a statement written by Paul that she was crying when we left.
Yeah, there's a couple statements that were made because as this book comes out, there's all these claims that are really not backed up by anything factual other than somebody else's speculation. Can you read, you have two statements, I believe. Can you read both of them for us?
These are signed letters from Aaron and Paul Downing. Ryan's is really long, and it's basically the same stuff. I'll start with Aaron. My name is Aaron Downing. I am writing this letter on behalf of my uncle Artie Ortiz as the daughter of Janet Downing. I have known Artie since I was 6 years old, from the spring of 1993 to the spring of 1995. Artie, my Aunt Carol, and their son AJ lived with my family at 71 Boston Street, Somerville, Mass. Prior to living with us, Artie and my mom had a good relationship, and while living with us, their relationship continued to be on good terms. I never witnessed an argument, a hatred discussion, or any tension between the two of them. In the 2 years Artie lived with us, our bond as a family grew stronger. As my mother did not kick Artie, my aunt, and their son out of our home. Artie and my aunt had applied for housing. They chose to move out when an apartment became available for them in Malden, Mass. I even remember my mother saying that she wanted them to continue living with us so they could save more money. Any story that contradicts this is false. Signed, Aaron Downing.
And can you read the one from Paul Downing?
To whom it may concern, my Uncle Artie has always been a loving and caring uncle to both me and my siblings. I remember quite fondly how he would chase me, my brother and sister around the house when he and my aunt Carol, would babysit us during our childhood years. When my uncle and aunt came to live with us, they both brought with them a sense of joy and joyfulness to the house that was lacking following the divorce of my parents. I could tell my mother loved Artie and Carol and baby AJ too around because we, her kids, trusted and loved him as well. I remember my mother crying in the den when my aunt and Artie broke the news to my mother that they were able to clear the extensive waiting list for state housing, that they would be moving out soon. It was a day we all dreaded, but knew the moment they would eventually clear the list, that they were able to spend together with my aunt and uncle is among the few loving memories I have of that house I grew up in. Signed, Paul Downing.
Now there's a conviction. A young man is convicted, which maybe makes it harder to have closure, but I don't know if there's ever really any closure.
No. And for me, the answers are different compared to the kids. The kids are doing very well. I believe they have the answers they wanted. Me, I just have the answers because there was so much speculation that it was me. And that hurts. That hurts so bad. It's just, I mean, 25 years, man. I really never spoke to anybody in the news media or anything about it. I did have that documentary film with Streetlamp Productions, but I don't know where that's going. And when I heard your podcast, I felt it'd be an opportunity if I left my phone number, you'd call me.
Yeah, and it's just, I think, hard when you see pictures of Edward and you hear about his gentle makeup and we just don't know much about him from the outside. So it goes, well, how could he do this crime unless he just snapped?
That's what I believe he snapped. But I don't know if you know, it's also mentioned, it was mentioned in court documents that he had on his bedroom walls newspaper headlines of natural-born killers. He had a telescope pointing to Janet's bedroom. I'll leave that part up to you to think what you want of it. I really can't say what I really think about that.
And maybe they found the guy, maybe they found the right guy quickly, but when they had a couple leads or a couple questions for other people, if they would have taken one or two steps, they would have been able to clear those people in the public's eyes as well, because they did question you.
Again, I'm going to say it, me and my wife were interviewed the following day by police. After that, I was never questioned. And in my eyes, and I believe in the police eyes, I was never a suspect because all my samples excluded me. I understand there's unknown DNA. And then all these lies come out afterwards. Time after. They didn't happen that night. They didn't happen the following day. Because Gina Mahoney, she hugged me that night. She even stated to the cop that I had no scratches or blood on me when I arrived.
Well, people will always make up speculation, but certain evidence and DNA evidence doesn't lie.
No, of course, it doesn't lie. No. I mean, it's like I was, talking to my wife at the time. There's a possibility they may find my fingerprints in the house, possibly on the glass when I was washing the windows, or because I later learned that latent fingerprints can stay on something for a long time. But, never any of that, never anything in blood, or, it's just a bunch of lies after Eddie was cornered, I'm going to say. And in my heart, I believe 110% it was him. No question about it. And the other thing, too, is it's mentioned quite a bit about where he worked. That he put newspapers together on Sunday mornings, and et cetera, because the big everybody went to, including her children, went to. They never mentioned the fact that it's also a pot porn store, porn magazines, sexual toys, and other sexual paraphernalia behind a closed door. Why would a 15-year-old be working there?
Yeah, I don't know. Doesn't seem like a place that I'd want my 15-year-old working. Artie, I want to thank you for taking the time to contact us, to be willing to be so open. I know that on our Facebook page and some other social media pages, Artie has been answering questions. He's very open. He's been very respectful to us and to any listener that I've seen him engage with. Please be respectful to him as well, as his sister-in-law was viciously murdered. And again, when these cases are covered, when there's defensive made for individuals, they have to point the finger at different people. That's just common, and sometimes you're caught in the crossfire, and people will speculate maybe to the end of time on whether these individuals should be pointed at or not. but it does happen. So I want to thank you so much, Artie, for coming on and clearing up some of that stuff and talking with us and being so respectful.
I want to thank you for the time and let me speak, because my wife is sitting there with me and she's like, I can't believe you're this happy to talk about something like that. I'm like, I need to. I feel good about doing this.
Well, it's been great talking to you, and I'm glad we're able to let you have the time and the forum to clear some things up. You stay safe, my friend, and talk to you soon.
All right, stay safe. Wear your mask.
Yes, sir.